What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Average Money Podcast. We got a co-host in the building today. It's the end of May, so it's getting a little bit more sunny. And speaking of sunny, if you are new to this podcast, my name is Brad Finn. I am joined every single week with Mr. Suns Out, Guns Out, JJ Buckner. How we doing, bud?
Let's go, baby. Dude, I'm excited, man. This is actually the final episode you and I are recording before I head off to Hawaii with the family. So I thought I'd bust out the bro tank and kind of enjoy it in a little bit. And I can't wait to get out there. Cannot wait to get out there.
So as the listeners now know, the entire month of May, we've been finding average Joes, average people from the street that are, making their way through financial independence. And it's so awesome when we hear and see people talking about this. And because we think, being on YouTube and stuff, we think we're like this secret club that like nobody knows about. And then you get out in the real world and you see that there's actually people like, oh, you know what FIRE is and you don't have a YouTube channel?
Or a blog.
Or a blog, yeah. So it's been really awesome this month getting to talk to somebody and get to see a bunch of different perspectives. And I've spoken to Joe, who we have on the show tonight with us, and you'll be pretty impressed with what Joe is doing right now and what his goals are already. And he's not a blogger and he's not a YouTuber. Joe, thanks so much for sitting down with us tonight, man. What's going on?
Nothing much. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited. Yeah, like Brad was saying, love talking about this stuff, and it's refreshing to have like-minded people to talk to about it because seems like everyone I talk to about it, they're like, "Oh, you're crazy. Like, what are you doing? Like, just enjoy your 20s." But I love talking to like-minded people about this.
Well, it'll be a good episode today, and he's legit an average Joe.
Yeah.
Yes, I know.
He couldn't get any better.
I've been waiting all month to say average Joe. All freaking month. Joe, you mentioned your 20s. I want to just start kind of like a brief background, which leads into, maybe like how old you are, what you do for a living, things like that. And then what was money like in the household growing up? When Joe was growing up, did we talk about money in the house? Were the parents talking about money? What did they maybe do? Like, when was your first remembrance of not so much personal finance, but just recognizing money was a thing?
So I always say I feel like that kind of put me on the right trajectory, my upbringing. My dad owned his own business growing up. He owned a deli, like nothing crazy, just like a small little place on Long Island. And, we always knew what was going on with the store, how business was doing. Was it good? Was it bad? Listening to him talk about employees and customers and things like that. So growing up, always, that's all we heard about. I got in there working when I was probably 7th grade. I'm in the back and my brother's in the front. Sometimes I'd be in the front, whatever. And I got a really good feel for money. And, I fortunately and unfortunately, when times were tough, I learned early on that, you got to get when the getting's good. Things won't always be there. You're going to run to tough times. And so that's always something that's in the back of my mind is save while you can save.
Common trend that we see with a lot is they were put to work early.
Yeah.
Was this hey, Joe, you're coming to work at the deli? Or was it or were you interested in getting in there and being a part of the business?
Well, it was more like, hey, Joe, if you're not doing anything on Saturday, come to the store. And it was more or less what else am I doing? That's when I'm 13 years old. Unless I had a baseball game and my mom would bring me after or before or something. So yeah, but in addition to that, my family, not just my immediate family, but my parents' siblings into property development in New York City. So that was also something, they're landlords still. They still have projects all going on all the time, just, one or two here and there. So that's just always something that was in conversation. Oh, this property, how's that property doing? Oh, this tenant's an issue. Oh, this guy we invested money with, it was a bad investment. So those were always conversations that went on at the dinner table, at family functions, and still go on to this day. They just worked on something recently, my family in Brooklyn. And unfortunately, right around the pandemic is when they were trying to sell the units. So it didn't work out as hot as they would have hoped. I think they still did all right, but you run into a lot of things like that.
So you're saying, you're hearing all these times of, tough hardship and things going on and people doing projects that sometimes go south. Did this ever, scare you off from learning about money or managing money or investing? Because, And I'm not saying everything was bad. I mean, but just from what you've said so far, I mean, that could look as like a young kid looking at like seeing, oh man, like this is some tough stuff that my parents and, uncles and aunts and everything's going through. Did that kind of scare you off at first, or was that kind of motivating to see if they, came out of it? How did that work?
To an extent, it did. I was all about investing money in the stock market, but I was very aware, like early on when I was investing into my Vanguard fund, I was like, oh, let me put it in like a conservative, like 50-50 fund. And even recently, that project I mentioned, like I was like, you know what? I don't want to invest money in this. Like, I don't know how things are going to be. Like, I was hesitant because, I knew it could end up poorly or it could end up well. But, I kind of chose the safer route with that.
How old are you, Joe?
28. I'm turning 29 soon.
So late 20s, and you're a school teacher.
But yeah, so I didn't get into that. So then,
yeah,
part of then
you didn't take over the deli. You didn't want to take the deli over.
No, actually, my dad always said that was his nightmare. Was me working and taking over the deli and saying, "Hey, Dad, can you get that customer over there?" He always said that was his nightmare. So yeah, like when I was looking to go to college, like the first thing I thought was, all right, I either want to be a teacher, go to graduate school, so I'm going to do something cheap. So I went to a state school. I paid all in, room and board, everything. 4 years was $50K.
Why did you think that?
Yeah,
what made you think that as an 18-year-old kid?
Because that's not normal.
No.
So, well, part of it was, my brother went to a different school, a private school, and for college, and I think he ended up taking out like almost $100K in loans. And I mean, he has his dream job now, so I don't think he regrets his decision. I mean, it all worked out. He literally worked for NASA, Boeing, like he has his dream job. So I think that really worked out well for him, and I don't think he regrets it. But seeing him take on $100K in debt, I'm thinking to myself, I'm trying to do math in my head, and I'm like, okay, I might be making this much when I graduate. I wasn't even thinking about interest then. I'm like, okay, or taxes. I was like, right, so I have to work for like 2 or 3 years to pay off that debt, minimum.
I didn't even think like that though. You could have told me, oh yeah, Brad, you're gonna go to college. We're just gonna have to take out $300,000 worth of debt. And I'm like, party, let's go. I didn't know what debt was. How did you even like? It seems I just don't want you to brush over things because there's things that just you're saying and you're making it sound like it's just every 18-year-old knows that $100,000 worth of debt is a bad thing. Like, how the hell did you know that?
So again, like going back to my parents and my upbringing, and like times weren't always good. Well, times were really good for plenty of years with my dad's business. And I remember him saying, like, when business wasn't as good, he said something along the lines of, I didn't realize this. My parents, like, they had no mortgage, like it was paid off. House was paid off already. So in 10 years, like, or less than 10 years, they paid off an entire house in a nice area. So the fact that that was paid off already was just one less bill they needed to worry about every month. So when things weren't good, hey, we have no debt. Or no major debt. Right. And they had the house then to, not that they ever did, but if they needed to take money out of it, then they had it there. Speaking
JJ Buckner's language over there, he just paid off his house and everyone was busting his chops like, you could get 8% and hit. JJ's a peace of mind guy, right, JJ?
For sure. I mean, I'm all about what makes you sleep better at night, so it's cool to hear that too. And to also hear like, that's another benefit. That's another good aspect of having like no debt and having the mortgages paid off is saying like, okay, well, hey, if something bad does happen, I'm still going to have a place to lay my head. I'm still going to have a place that my family can sleep with a roof over my head. And I don't have to have all this extra added stress. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because that's a good point. And that also leads into kind of like the whole situation of being financially savvy and understanding, like, I don't want to take out $100K, worth of debt to go to school. I want to try and do it the cheapest way possible. So, I mean, yeah, it's funny to see how all this background of all these different stories and how they all kind of come together.
Yeah. Joe, this fear of $100,000 with the college debt, when did debt turn into investing? We use buzzwords like the FIRE movement, financial independence, things like that. Are you aware of that whole niche scene? I know you're, like I said, you're not all over the internet and stuff like that, so I wouldn't be surprised. I'm just curious, when did debt go to investing, and where did that page turn?
So there was probably maybe my second or third year teaching. I was talking to one of my coworkers who was about the same age, and he was saying something to the effect of, he's like, I got to get out of my parents' house. He's like, I can't live with them. He's like, I don't get along with them. I'm thinking to myself, I get along with my parents just fine. And I'm doing the math in my head. He's telling me what his rent is. And he told me something to the effect of $20K a year about in rent. And, at that point I knew a little bit about compounding interest, and I kind of did the math in my head, and I said, how many years of work is 20 grand worth now? Like if I invested 20K right now, living with my parents, the money I saved living with my parents, if I invest it right now, how much is that worth at the tail end of my career? And I'm doing the numbers in my head, and I'm like, oh my God, if I live with my parents for another year, I effectively have to work like 2 or 3 years less.
You thought of that?
So, and I'm doing this in my head, and I'm like, wait a minute. So I've lived with my parents now for 1, 2, 3, and like I think it ended up being like 4 years. I lived with them for 4 years, and I'm like, so if I invested every single cent that I saved on rent, like let's say $80,000, by the age of 25, 26, whatever, and I just threw it in either a retirement account or even a taxable account, and what will that be worth when I'm 60? I was like, wait a minute, I could work like 10 less years doing that. And then like that just got me thinking about compounding interest, the eighth wonder of the world. And like I just, it just like became not an obsession with me, but like a fascination, and like, wait, people don't know about this.
So is that where it all started then? Was talking like, because I remember back whenever I graduated college, my first step into like finance was like, I had my student loans. How do I pay these off? So was your first thought of like, I know it sounded like you've been, through the whole finance stuff with your dad having his own business and whatnot, but whenever you're starting to actually like, okay, I need to invest some of my own money. Was that the first like light bulb that came on that said, okay,
yeah,
wow, this is it. I need to do this. Okay.
And
cool.
what'd you start with? Like, how did
that was my next question?
Yeah, go.
Right. So, so one person who is crucial in this whole process is my older brother, who, being an engineer that he is, super good with numbers, a couple years ahead of me. So he had more experience with it. So I was like, all right, where do I put money? He introduced me to Vanguard. So I started throwing a little bit of money in my taxable Vanguard account, nothing crazy, just like a couple $1,000s. Then I opened up a 403B at work, paid fees through the nose for a couple of years, probably like 2% plus, investing in stuff I had no idea what it was.
But you were in a retirement account, so it was okay.
Yeah. I was like, oh, it's all good. It's all good.
Yeah.
So started investing there. And then, I got to a point when I was like, okay, now like, again, still living with my parents, I'm a few years out of school, making decent salary. So I'm like, all right, let's just start putting more and more and more in there. And slowly but surely, I accumulated a pretty sizable amount of money in my Vanguard account. I just really just started, like, I will say, like, there was a period of time when I had like way too much money sitting around in like just regular savings account in Chase, right? But it probably wasn't until I was about like 24 or 25 when I was like, all right, let's just shovel everything into Vanguard, just everything.
And you said it was a taxable account and the 403B. Is there a Roth anywhere in the picture?
There was no Roth maybe until I'd say like 2 or 3 years ago.
How'd that happen?
Why the Roth 2-3 years later?
So what happened was when I changed jobs, so I went from my first school I was teaching at, which had the 403B, which did actually switch to Vanguard. So actually in my second or third year there, it did switch to Vanguard. So I had this big Vanguard 403B accumulated. And then I was like, oh, wait, what do I do with it now? Because I'm changing employers. Oh, I can roll it into a Vanguard Roth IRA, like all within the Vanguard, umbrella. Yeah. So I rolled it into there. And then I was like, all right, let's start putting $6K a year in there. Because at my new school, I didn't like their 403B options. I had just moved. So I was out of my parents' house and paying rent for the first time. It was pretty cheap overall. So I said to myself, all right, well, I'll at least put the $6K into the Roth IRA. And I wasn't contributing to the 403B for that full year.
Nice.
Because of the fees and everything?
It was partially because, it was a new employer. I wasn't sure how long I was going to be there.
Got it.
And I didn't like any of their options, basically.
Okay. So you're looking at all these different investments, and you're obviously savvy enough to decide, okay, I'm going to do this Roth instead of the 403B, la-di-da-di-da. Like, how did you learn about this? Like, were you looking things up online, listening to podcasts, watching videos? I mean, or just talking to your brother and he kind of set you on his way and said, hey, do this, do that, and let's roll with it. I mean, how'd you figure out how to do all this stuff?
So a lot of it was talking to him. Like, I feel like even today, like, I don't buy, like, just to skip ahead a few years, I didn't buy crypto before consulting with him and seeing what he thought. But then going back to, how I figured out about it, I just kind of went online. Like, I don't know, I just typed in 403Bs. What's a good 403B? What's a bad 403B? I think an awesome video that I watched came out years ago. It was John Oliver did like a thing about retirement accounts.
Great.
and how like criminal these companies are, these 401k companies, and just with fees. And at the end, he's like, hey, in this 1 minute, I'm just going to tell you everything you need to know. And he's like, keep the fees below 1%. He's like, just all these little things he's telling you that honestly, I was like, this guy did a service to so many people. He literally just spoke about like when we tried to make open a 401k for our employees, we realized like they were getting like just killed on fees.
Yeah.
It's a really good video. Highly recommend it.
I'm gonna link that because it is good. I am gonna link that.
Yeah.
I don't even understand it.
Oh,
very good.
Yeah, it's really good.
And that sent me down a rabbit hole. I was like, okay, so what makes a good 403b? What are these fees? How do I figure out the fees? And then when you start looking, like, what's an expense ratio? And like, sometimes the expense ratios would be so high that I'm like, is that what it is? You know, you see an expense ratio of 2.5%, and I'm like, 2.5%. I said, but that one's 0.02%. I'm like, are they the same thing? What is expense ratio? So you go down the rabbit hole, and just like anyone else, like, you just find all these YouTubers, you know, a lot of the popular ones out there. You guys weren't around yet, so I probably wasn't checking out your videos. You know, like I think I don't know if I'd spoken to you guys earlier about it, but like Mr. Money Mustache was like one I came across, and all that guy's whole channel.
So Mr. Money Mustache was what did it for me for the whole FIRE movement, because I kind of came in as like, pay off the debt. Okay, now I got my debt paid off. Now what do I need to be doing with investing? I was doing like retirements while paying off debt and stuff. But when I did the same thing. I went down the rabbit hole, just watching YouTube videos, reading blog posts, you know, listening to podcasts, even though there wasn't too many finance podcasts back then. But that's what did it for me was Mr. Money Mustache. And dude, I'm curious on what your thought process was when you stumbled upon this, because for me, figuring out the FI movement and FIRE, and that this was even a possibility that this could happen, I like sprinted home in the car to like, I couldn't tell my wife fast enough. I was like texting her like, we got date night tonight because I'm gonna blow your mind. This is insane. What I just found out today. Is that kind of the same thing that happened, or was it just like, oh, okay, you know, I kind of knew this was already going to be there. I knew this was a possibility. Or
was your mind blown, or did you like just, or were you more pissed off that you didn't know it, or that more people didn't know it?
It's like, you know, the rule of 72, right? That classic rule of 72. I'm like, wait a minute, like, why? Like, I'm thinking to myself, like, why are people why are fully employed, you know, healthy people, why are they working to 65, you know, and like living on a like barely getting by? I'm like, I don't get it. Like, I honestly don't get it. I mean, I understand things come up, and that's a different story, but you're fully employed for 40, like, how are you working for 40 years? Like, what are you doing with it all? So that's something that like to this day, I don't get. And I almost can't get into conversations with people about money, because I'm like, what did you do with everything? Where to go? No, because that's really what goes through my mind.
Especially people in similar like professions as us. Like when I talk to other teachers, and other teachers are like, yep, I only got 4 more years. And I'm like, you're like 80. Like, what are you still? And then they try and give you the old like, well, I still love it. And I'm like, you can't even walk down the stairs.
Yeah. Well, what happens, and you know, I don't know, JJ, how much Brad's told you, but about like our pension, like there's certain years you can retire. We're in a lower pension tier, so we can't fully retire till we're 63. But I'm like, doesn't mean you have to work until you're 63. Like, that's just when you could take benefits. I'm like, if you save appropriately, you can retire at least at 59 and a half, right?
Yeah.
And with us, we have the hack of all hacks, the 457B, which is like,
oh, Joe, I talk about the 457.
Yeah.
Maybe you can
link the video there, but that was,
you can back me up, because both being teachers in New York, we're in the same deferred comp plan. We have I think we have pretty identical funds that we've doing in there. You can back me up when you say that the 457 is the most magical thing ever, right? That's your number one before.
Yes.
Do you do 403B now, or you still know 403B?
So I pretty much max out my 457. I think I put like maybe 500 short of the limit, just because I didn't want to figure out the maxing it out thing. Then I max out my IRA, and the 403B, actually, I was telling Brad the other day, they just, we can use Vanguard now at our school. And I was like, oh shoot, now do I do this too? Because you can double dip. So I'm like, do I put $45,000 a year into retirement accounts?
Well, I want to talk about that number, because that number intimidates a lot of people. When you say you're pretty much maxing out your 457,
Yeah.
Is that something that like you started a school year and you're like, boom, I got 19.5? Or did you do a kind of, what I did was I kind of increased every half a year if I could. Every time I got a raise, I tried to boost my amount and I worked up to maxing it. And I feel like people are so intimidated, or they at least have this mindset like, if I'm not maxing it, it's not worth it. They don't understand that just a little bit of money can go a long way. What was your approach to maxing out $19,500? Because I mean, most people don't just have that sitting around. Like, how was that goal accomplished?
So when I first started putting money into my first 403b, when I was like 23 years old, I was putting in like $100 a paycheck or something like that. And then I was realizing, and I kicked that up over time. Then I was realizing in hindsight, like, what was I doing? Like, that was like nothing. I could have put in way more. So then I was like, you know what? I'm going to take advantage of this. So I put in like, I don't know what I put in right now. I put in like, I think $1,700 a month into it, and whatever that comes out to be. Mm-hmm. And I was like, let me just put it all in as much as I can, as quickly as I can. I can afford to. I'm just, I don't have kids, I don't have dependents. My bills aren't that crazy right now. And I was like, let me do it while I can. My mindset for retirement, like savings, is I want to put in as much as possible before buying a home. That way, if when I buy a home, start a family, if bills start to creep up higher and higher, at least that nest egg is there and growing. And I don't have to worry as much about, okay, I still need to contribute to retirement.
That's such a solid point. I'm so glad you said that, because it's so true. I mean, the more you can get built up earlier, time is always on your side. The earlier you can get started, the better. So I got a couple questions to play off that then. The first one is, what are you exactly investing in inside these?
Oh yeah, you mentioned crypto. Are you a stock guy? Like,
yeah. So what all your investments look like? You got the retirement accounts. Do you have anything outside of those? What are you investing inside the retirement accounts? What's that look like?
So my retirement accounts are pretty much a little bit of target retirement in Vanguard, but mostly some VTSAX and VFIAX. Between those two, that's where like all my retirement is. The 457 account is in an equities fund, which is pretty much the S&P 500. My brokerage is a little bit funky. I would say about half my brokerage is index funds like VFIX and VTSAX. I'd say about, I'll just tell you the number, maybe 5,000 is in individual stocks. So nothing crazy, just for fun, honestly, just something to look at on my phone when I'm bored. And then I do have a significant sum in, you guys probably don't even use this one, in Vanguard's VASIX. It's their income fund. It's like one of their life strategy funds. It's like a 20 stock, 80 bond fund. And that's really? That's like a pseudo savings account for me, because I don't really use a savings account. So that's like my home, wedding, other things, like that's where that's invested.
Is that in a taxable brokerage account?
That's a taxable brokerage account, because I was like, I had like money sitting in Marcus, and I'm like, what's this doing here? So I was like, you know what? I'll just put it there. It'll get a little bit more.
What is it? Yeah, I don't know much of it. Can you educate me on that quick? Is that an interest? What is it? It's you're getting capital gains?
So it's 20% stock, 80% bond. It's a fund through Vanguard. It returns on average about 5%. And I looked, right in last April when the market took a dive, it only dropped 5%. So I'm like, okay, like this seems pretty solid. It's definitely not returning, especially the way the bonds market has been right now. It's not returning crazy numbers, but it's doing better than I would in a savings account. And it's pretty safe. So that's where I'm putting, that is like my savings account. I know that's not really advisable, but that's kind of what I do.
So that's kind of what you're using for your liquidity.
Yeah. Yep. And then I think I have a little bit sitting in Marcus still. I'm probably just going to close that account soon though. And then I have maybe about 4,000 crypto.
Man. So people would say that you're probably a pretty boring guy. I know there's people out there that want to debate this. They're like, yeah, of course the guy's saving all his money. He probably sits at home and his mom. Do you ever have any fun?
Yeah. So that's like the one thing, I think I don't know if I told you this story, Brad, but like my first or second year teaching, one of my students was like, you live with your parents? I'm like, yeah. He's like, you get like a full teacher salary? I'm like, yeah. He's like, so what do you do with it all? I'm like, exactly. No, I always say like, I do whatever I want. Like fortunately, I guess there's not a lot of things that I want. So like, for example, pre-COVID, like the previous summer, my girlfriend and I, we went on a trip I think we were gone for like 22 days. We went to Hawaii. We went to Vegas. We drove around the Southwest. We did like that whole thing. Hawaii, we did all the hiking, everything. But when we went to those places, I will say, like, when we went to Hawaii, we hiked all the time. Like, we weren't like spending a ton of money at restaurants or anything. We were cooking at the Airbnb a lot, but we're still loving it. Like, we were in Hawaii. It was beautiful. We did everything that Hawaii has to offer. The Big Island, we did Kauai, all that stuff. And yeah, the trip wasn't cheap. Obviously, you're doing a lot of flights. Maybe it was like $3,000, but at the grand scheme of things, here's how I thought about that. That's 2 months rent if I didn't live with my parents.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that's why, like, to me, I was like, living with my parents afforded me so much. And I was fortunate that, that worked out. The summer before that, we did a trip around Europe for 2 weeks, did that whole thing, flying around Northern Europe, Norway, went all the way up, visited Brad, the northernmost brewery in the world.
Oh, wow, that's cool.
Which is kind of cool. So, I don't spare any expense. I will say, like, we don't go out to eat as much, but one thing I've found is that we kind of enjoy just cooking more, like it's something to do together. We just went to the butcher down the block and we got a nice steak for $20. But you know what? That and a couple potatoes, we can make ourselves an awesome meal, bottle of wine, $30. Something that would have cost us, 3 or 4 times that if we went out to dinner. So those are the things, like, I feel like I'm not like
deprived. You're not deprived. Do you feel deprived?
Like, I don't know what else I would spend money on personally.
So here's a funny, and this is going to fit perfect to what you're saying, Joe, is I actually, so my wife scheduled me a massage before we left for Hawaii. I'm married up, boys. I told you. I mean, she said, hey, babe, here's this massage. Go do it. So we're sitting at this massage, and I'm talking to, I know the person who gives the massage, small town. Everybody knows everybody. So we're talking about everything, and she's asking about homes, and, everybody our age right now is building a home. It seems like everyone's building homes right now, which is like the worst time to build a home because lumber is like sky high. But, everyone's building these bigger homes because they're all starting to have kids now. And everyone's so worried about, oh, my house ain't big enough. Oh, my house ain't big enough. I got to have a bigger house for some more room, whatever. Like guys, Brad, you've been in my house. Like, it's not a big house at all, and I have 2 kids. I got a dog. Like, to the normal person, my house, they look at it and they're probably like, wow, how the hell does this family do this? We don't even bat an eye at it. But what I'm getting at is then, the person that was talking to me about at the massage, she's like, so you guys are going to Hawaii, whatever, and doing this. And I said, yeah, like, because she just got done asking me about, like, do we ever think we're going to build a home or do whatever, because that's what everybody else is doing our age. I said, to be honest, Lindsay and I would rather spend the money on experiences and the memories and being able to travel and do things and spend those times and memories with our kids. And Joe, that sounds like exactly what you're getting at, is we get so much more fulfillment out of spending money on things we enjoy and things we'll remember and get to spend those memories with loved ones and friends and family, to where when you go buy a nice new car or, a brand new house or a new gadget or whatever, like, it's cool until, like, that coolness effect, that newness, it's going to wear off. And then it's just going to be your everyday car. It's going to be your everyday little gadget, whatever it is. And it's just your home you live in. But whenever you go and, like, spend money on, like, entertainment and experiences, that stuff lasts a lifetime.
Yeah.
And I think that's also such a big thing, is when you really think about that, majority of the money that people spend their money on is material items. If you can cut that out in your living expenses, you can do so much while also preparing yourself and getting yourself set up for financial independence to retire early, if that's something you strive to do. It's pretty crazy when you really think about it, how the people say, oh man, that's so cool, I wish I could do that, when I just want to be like, I want to grab them and be like, you can. Let me lead you to the water. Like, this is how it's done. Like, you just got to find stuff like this. So let me ask you this then. I want to go back real quick to kind of the investing portion of, what you're doing. So you said the 457. I'm going to guess that's kind of like your main bread and butter to have the opportunity to retire early, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you didn't have the 457, what do you think you would be doing to try and retire early if you didn't have that 457 account that you could invest into? Do you have something you think you would do, or you're not sure yet? Or
are you even looking to, like, retire early? Do you love your job? Sure. Do you love your job? Like, when I talk about my 457, I say I max at first because I don't want to teach till I'm 59 and a half. do you have that sort of goal? And yeah, if we didn't have the 457 to help us get there, because with the 457, we can, as soon as we leave our job, we can take that money out, unlike the 403B or the 401k. So yeah, definitely. That's a great question, JJ. What would be the backup if we lost our 457? And do you plan on teaching forever?
So, obviously life can throw like things in your way to kind of mess up your plans, but I feel like physically when at the end of the school day, I'm 28 and I feel beat at the end of the day sometimes. And I'm 29 or almost 29. I don't see how I could physically do this job beyond 50. And that might be even pushing it. So like just for my own physical well-being, I'm fairly certain I can't do this job to 59 and a half or 63, whatever they make the retirement. So that's why I'm like, I need to stop working full time before then, at least as a teacher. So, I'm also of the mindset though, where I'm like, I don't want to just stop working entirely. Like I would love to do part-time stuff. Like I work part-time as an adjunct professor at a local college. It's great. It's low stress. It's nice little money on the side, like things like that. I coach a little bit too. I like that. It's fun. It's something to do. I would do for free. Like I like those things, and they're low stress and I really don't feel super tired at the end of it. So it's not like when I say like, oh, I don't want to work past 50. I don't want to work at all. Like I just don't see myself full-time classroom past that age. And that's just a target I've set for myself. If I didn't have the 457 though, that would be tough. Pretty much everything would have to be taxable. Then I'd probably just do a little bit more into my brokerage. And I feel like, and this is like the one hurdle that I feel like many people with investing can't really get over is getting into real estate. Not as easy as opening an app on your phone, clicking a few buttons. You can invest $10,000 in Vanguard in about a minute, not even, or Robinhood, whatever you use. Investing in real estate, getting a rental property, things like that, those sources of income, those would be awesome. That's just a hard barrier. I feel like for most people, it's scary. Where do you start? It's almost like you kind of have to know somebody and like get in with them, it seems like, or someone who's done it before you kind of get comfortable doing it on your own, because I don't see how I could possibly even start, even if I had the money to do it, buying a rental property, renting it out, doing that whole house hacking idea.
That would be something that you might look into more if you didn't have something like the 457.
Right. I feel like that would be like a necessity almost.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, especially being in the New York market, that's already like another like stab in the back too. If you're in one of the most expensive markets in the United States, that's already another hurdle you guys have to try and get over. So yeah, I totally get that 100%. And yeah, man, that 457. Too bad everyone can't invest in it. That'd be perfect. It's like the perfect account for the FIRE community.
It's a scam.
I don't even tell people about this. I don't think people know about this.
Right.
I honestly don't think like Governor Cuomo knows what this is.
Joe, let me ask, I'm just curious your opinion, because you're a very, very smart guy, and I know you have probably a pretty logical answer for this. Inside the 401k or the 403b or the 457, Roth version or just traditional tax deferred?
So obviously the IRA is Roth. I was doing the 457 all Roth, and then I was kind of like, I do want to lower my tax base a little bit just for a little bit more liquidity. So right now it's 50-50 Roth traditional. But I will say, and I just feel like inevitably taxes, and we're seeing it right now, we might be staring down the barrel of higher taxes coming soon. I feel like we don't know what the tax rates are going to be in the future. And it's kind of like a peace of mind with a Roth. Like, what the tax rates are now. You're not going to pay taxes in the future. That peace of mind is very valuable. The one thing is, and I'm not one of those people who's like, oh, I can understand the traditional more if I was like, I'm definitely going to retire out of state to a no state income tax state, because you do save then a lot more.
Right.
Moving, let's say, from New York to Florida. But I'm not one of those people who's like, oh, I'm definitely going to, skip town to Florida or something like that, or Texas. So
I'm so scared to switch to the Roth because I'm so used to my paychecks now that switching over from and actually having to pay taxes on the money first. You probably have figured it out to the dollar, Joe, but it probably wouldn't even go down that much. But for some reason, I'm just so scared that my paycheck is going to get smacked if I do the Roth version.
Yeah, you'll pay I think probably 33% more, at least.
Yeah, see, I don't know. But Joe, I want to talk about the people that might be thinking to themselves, like, this guy, he mentioned his girlfriend, he mentioned renting, living with mom. How does that goal of getting out by 50, how does, managing your money play into things like, I'm probably going to get married one day, if it's not to my girl now, but it's maybe somebody else, or there's a very, very good chance that I'm going to have a down payment on a house one day. How do you balance, you mentioned a little bit of liquidity inside that Vanguard fund, but how are you thinking about kids, wife, and other major expenses that might, quote, like put a hiccup in your play? Because now that I've been doing this, I'm like so obsessed. Like I was just upstairs talking to my wife, we're renovating our kitchen and stuff, and I don't see the price tag as like, oh man, we don't have that money. I'm more thinking of the price tag like, damn it, I just want to invest that money. Like when is it going to bother you when you have to put down $50,000 on a down payment on a house, or have you planned for that? What's that like?
I'm kind of planning on it. But the whole idea of expenses coming up and whether they're foreseen or unforeseen, I always figure the goalposts are never going to move forward. They're only going to move back. So keep them as close as possible for now. Like keep that target of 50, because if my target is 65 and there's a hiccup, all of a sudden it's 72. But if my target's 50 and there's a hiccup, okay, then maybe it's 55, maybe it's a little bit more. So that's like one of my mindsets there. And I also mentioned earlier that like, I want to get in as much as possible into my retirement accounts before I have to buy a home, because I don't want to have to think about, okay, well, I still need to retire also. If, I have to renovate the kitchen, start paying for a house, whether my dream home comes on the market and it needs some work and I really need to put money into that, I don't want to have to also think about, oh, well, now I can't put money into my retirement account. I'm never going to retire. I want as much in there as quickly as possible. So that's kind of where I'm at there.
I like that a lot. I don't think we've ever really talked about that on the podcast, is like getting started at a younger age. So if you're like 18, 19, 20, even like 23, 24, 25, listening to the podcast right now, like take this in.
He's front loading.
Yeah, that's exactly what he's doing. It's a perfect plan, because let's say, when you do buy a house, get married, have kids, like that stuff does add up. It's a little more expensive. So it will be nice to know, like, okay, my first younger self, younger Joe, worked his ass off to put the money in here, to know that whenever that time does come in life, I can feel okay and sleep good at night, knowing that if I have to back off a little bit from that retirement, I still have this big foundation of dollars in that's going to be working for me throughout those years, where I may have to back off a little bit. So I think that's a perfect point. What you got, Brad?
One thing that JJ and I talk a lot about, Joe, and as I mentioned, like marriage, kids and stuff like that, where's your girl in this? Is she just as intelligent about personal finance as you? Are you guys learning it together, or do you take pride? Like, I know JJ and I talk like when you're married, you have one account. Like, how does this work when you're dating somebody, but you're pretty sure this is serious? You're pretty sure you're both going to be buying a house. Like, did she have student debt? Where is this as you guys enter like a true commitment phase? Where is she in this whole personal finance story? Because soon you're not going to be able to say a sentence without saying we, and I get yelled at for it all the time. Those, I make this, I'm in my 403b, I'm in my Roth. No, sir. That's going to go away very, very fast. So what is that like? Because I know that's a major hiccup for a lot of people.
Yeah, well, I got to watch what I say, because she might be listening. So no,
she's around the corner, like, watch what you say, boy.
No, she's over the camera right now. She's like, don't this.
Yeah. No, so well, we went to the same state school. So as far as like money goes, she didn't have a lot of student debt. She had some that she paid off. And she's an accountant, so she's one of those people who sees all the time people's incomes, what they pay in taxes, what they're investing, like all that stuff. But one thing I will say is I'm very lucky in that I kind of have somebody who's on the same page with me with a lot of things. Like we don't spend a lot of money on things we don't need. Like we go out frequently, but we also love to cook in. We don't buy a lot of new clothes. We don't have a lot of expensive items at all. The things we enjoy doing together are free. It's hiking. It's doing stuff like that.
Is she on the retire early bandwagon, or is she just good with money?
So she's definitely not thrilled with her current job. I'll tell you that much. It's just stressful and stuff like that. Being an accountant has all sorts of, not a lot of people love it. And that's definitely something that, I think maybe I might be speaking for her too much, but maybe has made her think about it more.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't know if you can see the old couch behind me, but a few months ago, it was like, that's my grandma's old couch. It was like, oh, we need to get a new couch here. And then it's like, do we need to spend $600 on a couch? Like, and like, this one's perfectly fine. Honestly, it's not that bad. So, you know, we have those conversations, and I think she's slowly but surely like, so now it's, you know, it's funny. It's like, just like any teaching, you know, my brother helped me a lot with learning how to set up a Vanguard account. And now I helped her set up her Vanguard account, and she's investing more. She has a pretty nice 401k through work and a pension through work. So she's very fortunate there, where like that was just kind of being done. So she didn't necessarily have to have so much, but, you know, she had a little too much sitting in her checking account with Chase and her Chase savings. So, you know, we started putting that into Vanguard. You know, I think she did Betterment first, and now Vanguard, because she had to with like compliance stuff. You know, she put a little bit in crypto, and now she's investing her money. So, you know, we're very much, and I will say that's helpful on like I don't know if you want to call it the FIRE journey, because I can't really speak for her so much, but the fact that we're both on the same page with spending, we don't value physical possessions a lot. Honestly, I can't remember the last time either of us bought new clothing. You know, like I say, like those things, like it just doesn't. And I wear, like, you know, I just,
at 28 years old, it just blows my mind to hear people say that. And one thing you said before that I wanted to jump on right away, but we kind of got past it. You're like, I kind of hate talking to people about money because it's a little bit frustrating. I'm in a position where I hear people, you know, at the water cooler or whatnot. How do you introduce, like when you hear somebody say something and you just are you the type of person that's like, hold on, you just said, I'm sorry for eavesdropping, or like, do you keep your mouth shut? How do you approach even when you're out with your boys, like maybe some of your friends are freaking YOLO weirdos. How do you approach this conversation? Because 28, like it's different when I'm 39 years old at the barbecue with my two kids and I'm talking to a new dad and I'm like, so how's your portfolio? But if I would have did that shit when I was 28, I would have beat myself up. I would have bullied myself. So like, how are you dealing with people that you maybe hear around the office, or even, you know, friends or family? How does that get introduced?
So of like my good friend group of guys I've known like since high school and college and stuff, we're fair. I'd say like maybe half of us are pretty open about like, we'll text about investments all the time. You know, oh, what are you investing in? Or, oh, I just, you know, my company just started offering Vanguard. Should I use it? That was a text I got a couple months ago. Then I get a really bad text once in a while that's like, hey man, you should invest in ARK. But you know, those are, it's good to hear those conversations though, because actually like two of my good friends that I talked stocks with, they're actually both married to New York State teachers. And I said, you guys got to figure out if your wife has this 457 thing. And I said, just look it up. Actually, I sent them Brad's video about the 457. I'm like, it's a real thing. Like, trust me. So they checked it out. One of them looked into it. He's like, yeah, she opened them right away. He's like, I didn't think it was like a real thing because it was like too good to be true. So we do talk about it. So me and some of my friends anyway. And then as far as like coworkers go, you know, I talk about it, but you know, it does run into that money's kind of a taboo thing. You don't really know everyone's situations. You know, I've told people before, they're like, I don't even know where to get started. I said, you literally just have to open a Robinhood account. Not that I'm promoting Robinhood, but it's a super easy one to use. I said, just open it up and buy the S&P 500. Like I said, just do that. And they're like, what's the S&P 500? I'm like,
boo. Like, here we go.
Like, all right, now we got to take another step back. I'm like, okay, so go on CNBC and watch that little thing at the bottom, the green and red arrows. So that's like, you know, someone the other day was asking about like, what are points? Like when the market goes up, points. I'm like, don't worry about points, just worry about percentage. So those are things that come up. So, you know, I've always offered to people, I'm like, you know, if you really want, I could sit down with you and help you open it. But I will say the thing I'm always hesitant about, especially with like where the market is now, it's like, what if, you know, one of my coworkers who's a good friend of mine, convince her to put $10,000 in her 403B, open it up, and all of a sudden the market corrects and takes a nosedive. And she's like, oh my God, Joe, I just lost $2,000 because of this thing you told me to do. And I'm just giving generic advice. So that's the reason I'm hesitant to like, be like, no, do this. Not that they're stupid, but they don't like, they might not realize like, no, like it has time to correct itself and go up again before you're 59 and a half.
Right. Because they won't think like that. If they're new, they won't think like that.
Yep.
Yeah. Like they're going to see it go up and down and be like, oh no, I lost all this money, but not realize like, it doesn't matter all that matters is where it's at in 40 years or 30 years.
I know what it's like with me, but how many people do you think that you're working with, even in your small circle, that don't even know that your school offers the 457?
I think most know about it, but I would say of the 457 specifically.
Yeah. Like everyone knows they got a 403B. Everyone.
Yeah, honestly, I don't know like if anyone really knows, aside from like a couple people,
Or maybe they've heard of it, but they don't know the benefits. That's what I want to scream from the mountaintop. I don't care about telling people what to invest in, but I always like try and walk in the office and be like, ooh, so, oh man, I love my 457. I just wait. I like perk my ears up, just waiting for somebody to be like, what's that, Brad? And then like, I'll just shoot down. They'll wish they never asked me that question. Like, I just try and leave like little crumbs. Like you said, like, oh, isn't it so sweet that we got Vanguard for our 403B? Why is that sweet, Brad? Would you like me to really tell you why? And then it's hard too because a lot of people I work with think I'm a clown shoe. So if I try and give, if I try and give advice, they're like, listen to this Muppet over here trying to give. That's a shout out to my boy Matt, by the way, with the great Muppet reference to his CPA a couple weeks back. Anyway, but I'm sure there's like a little of that, like you're a young guy and you try and talk to a 40-year-old. And if I didn't know anything and I'm a cocky guy, arrogant guy, and I got this 28-year-old noob teacher telling me how I should invest my money in my retirement, I'd probably tell him to pound salt.
I'll tell you, actually, it's surprising you mentioned like a 40-year-old teacher. At the last school I was at, my mentor teacher, I guess he heard me talking about money one day with some of the other teachers. And like one day when I was like in his classroom talking to him, he's like, hey, like, he just started asking me about 403Bs. This guy's, 40 something years old and he wasn't investing in a 403B because he was relying on the school's pension, on the state's pension system. So I just started talking to him about it. So there are people, and it's great to see, like, you love seeing like people that are older than you kind of humbling themselves and like, I don't know. And it's something that me as a teacher, I'm 28, but when my students are 16, it's humbling when I say to a student, like, oh, I don't know that. Show me that. Oh, how did you do that? Like it shows like the willingness to grow. And even teachers at my current school, a couple of them have like asked about their retirement, their 403Bs, and literally showed me their, gigantic balances in their 403B accounts. And they're like, is this what I should be invested in? Like the market's going down. Is this okay? I'm like, I really can't tell you, but like, it seems like you're invested in pretty much an index fund. But as far as like I said, though, like the people that are my age, roughly, I want to give them advice, but I'm hesitant because, I don't want to tell them what to do with their money. I don't want to tell them that there's no I don't want to tell somebody who I know can afford it. Like, yeah, you can put in $20,000 a year into your retirement account. They're gonna be like, what? Like their mind's gonna be like, what do you mean I can put $20,000 a year in? I'm like, yeah, you can definitely afford it. Like, cause I know what they make roughly. Right. I know what their expenses are roughly. Like, I know they can all afford it, but I don't want to tell them like, hey, you can afford this. Like, there's no reason why you can't do this.
So question for you, we're talking about this financial independence, retire early stuff. Do you have a number in mind that you need to hit to be able to consider yourself like financial independence, or like, is those things you have talks with the girlfriend, later on down the road in life, like, hey, this is what I'm trying to work towards. I need to get to this milestone. And then I know I'm officially made it. I crossed the finish line.
Are you trying to live off dividends, or like, have you heard of the 4% rule? Like, yeah, that's a great question, JJ.
So I'm familiar with the 4% like withdrawal rule, so like that idea that people have in their mind is like $1 million. You can withdraw 40,000 a year. I don't have a specific number in mind. I will say, as far as the FIRE movement goes, I'm like very, very casual about it. I'm just kind of of the mindset where I'm going to put in as much as I can. And quite frankly, I don't have a budget. I don't have enough expenses to, quite frankly, in my opinion, warrant a budget. I don't have a budget. I don't have like a net worth tracker. I don't have any of that stuff. I just, like I say to people, like I just shovel as much money into these accounts as I possibly can. Any excess money that I have gets put in, and I might have, I don't know, a couple $1,000s in liquidity, and that's it.
So I got to ask you this. That actually shocks me that
not all superheroes wear capes.
Well, no, it shocks me that you don't track your net worth, being you seem like a pretty like analytical guy, and with numbers or whatnot. I'm actually shocked that you don't.
He knows what it is. He doesn't track it. He doesn't track it because he knows what it is. He knows what it is.
Well, like I just open up Vanguard. I go, okay, that number. And then I open up Coinbase. I say, okay, that number. and then I open up Marcus, and then I just do a quick little crunch in my head, and like it's a nice number. I'm happy with it, and like I don't include my car in that, and I don't have property,
Right.
so
Okay.
it's not like, to me, like tracking net worth. It doesn't seem worth it to me for my purposes.
Because he's in his young YOLO phase. He has his goal is just get as much money in, and he knows it's going to go up. So to say that he's half a millionaire, a millionaire, whatever, that doesn't mean anything to you just yet, because you probably don't need to worry about that till you're thinking about the finish line. You think about the finish line, but right now you're in like the do work phase.
Yeah.
Yeah, like if I like, what's the point of me? Like the way I think of it anyway is like, let's say my target was 2 million. I almost feel like it would be like depressing to like look at how much I have and be like, oh my God, 2 million. That's like, how many times does my money have to double to get there? So to me, it's kind of like nice where I just throw everything I have in there. And then once in a while, I just do quick little mental math, adding up those numbers. And I'm like, oh, whoa, that's nice. Like I don't track it day by day. To me, it's almost like, how much do you gain by looking at the S&P 500 going up and down every day? Like you drive yourself crazy. Oh, it goes up 1%, down 1%. So I just say, you know what? I'll add up the numbers every so often, put in as much as I can, and just let it go.
JJ, it's like doing a CrossFit workout where you don't keep time. You're like, I'm just going to do it. Or like when I go on a bike ride and I don't bring my power meter. Just like, I'm just going to go out and just enjoy this. I'm going to go pretty hard, but I don't need to see how many watts I'm pushing right now.
I'm a tracker. I am. I have to. It's one of those things. I don't know. I got to do it. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's how my mindset or what. I got to know everything down to the penny. I don't know why. I've always been like that.
Joe, it was so like, it's almost refreshing that you admitted that you've probably heard 1 or 2 episodes of the podcast before. Like there was no song and dance here. This was probably as genuine as we can get. Even anybody else.
Yes.
Like I seeked you out only because I've had casual conversation with money. And like, I remember when you first like mentioned like, oh, the 457. And I was like, what does this guy know about I'll tell you about the 457. And then like, you knew all your shit. I was like, all right. So it really is. I just want to reiterate that to the listeners. Like Joe is not a like subscriber to the channel. Doesn't like, he's just a guy that I happened to bump into and started talking about money. And when I was like, I have a financial YouTube channel, and he was like, cool, dude. Like, have you ever heard
of a million other people?
Have you ever heard of Graham Stephan? I'm like, you son of a bitch. So, I mean, no, it was very nice. And I appreciate you taking the time and, talking, because I think every single time we talk about this same exact goal, the journeys are so different. And some of the things you said in there even resonated with me, and in the conversations that we've had. I'd never maybe looked at that angle, even that net worth thing I never really looked at it that angle. So I want to just say thanks so much. Jay, do you have anything you want to mention or say before we let Joe get on with his evening?
I mean, Joe, you're killing it, dude. I just want to say we appreciate having you on. I mean, at 28, rocking it out like you are. Just keep going, dude. I mean, it's awesome to hear your story. We got to have him back on. Like we said, we got to have all these guys back on. That's like maybe a year down the road or 6 months, see if anything's changed or what's happening, and see if you get a house or whatever it is.
When he gets married, he gets a house. We'll ask him how that FI journey is going.
Yeah, don't forget how much when we put in retirement. It won't be as exciting.
No, that's awesome, man. Seriously though, dude, you're killing it. Keep rocking it, and really do appreciate you coming on and having you on.
Yeah, and if I had like one thing to add, I just got to say, like, I feel like if anything has put me on the right trajectory, I was very fortunate to have parents who I get along with, could live with, like even after college, and money was never a taboo in my household. And I'm very fortunate to have grown up in a home like that. So I'd say like definitely my parents were like huge in helping me with money.
Talk money. Money doesn't need to be taboo.
So true.
I think that's huge.
All right, guys, thanks so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this month of May, and in contrast with the voicemails and everything, like it's the podcast is just getting so fun for JJ and I. And like I said, hopefully we'll get to do this more. I mean, we were only able to do it for 1 month because we are so small, and it's been a really, really good time. Till we catch you guys on the next one, take care.